Welcome to Celestial Zodiac. Today we're continuing our progressed chart series by exploring one of the most subtle yet fascinating progressions in astrology: progressed Mercury. While the progressed moon often brings emotional changes and the progressed sun reflects major identity evolution, progressed Mercury works differently. This progression is quieter, more internal, and deeply connected to how you think, communicate, learn, process information, and make decisions over time. Many people overlook progressed Mercury because its effects aren't always dramatic on the surface. But if you look back at different phases of your life, you may notice periods where your thinking changed completely. Maybe you became more analytical, more outspoken, more cautious, more curious, or more emotionally intuitive. Sometimes your interests change. Other times your communication style changes, or you suddenly feel mentally ready for something you avoided before. That's progressed Mercury at work. In secondary progressions, Mercury moves much more slowly than it does by transit, and depending on your natal chart, it may stay in the same sign for many years before eventually shifting into another sign. Because of this, Mercury progressions often describe long-term mental development rather than temporary moods or events. This progression doesn't usually force external events to happen. Instead, it changes your internal lens. It affects how you interpret reality, how you gather information, how you speak, how you learn, and what your mind naturally focuses on during a particular chapter of life. A progressed Mercury shift can coincide with returning to school, changing careers, developing new interests, becoming more social, becoming more introspective, or completely rethinking your worldview. Sometimes the changes happen gradually enough that you barely notice until years later. And unlike the progressed moon, which tends to bring emotional experiences that are easier to feel, progressed Mercury can be incredibly subtle because it operates through thought patterns. It's less about obvious external change and more about how your mind evolves behind the scenes. Progressed Mercury represents the evolution of the mind over time. In astrology, Mercury rules thinking, communication, speech, learning, writing, decision-making, perception, mental processing, curiosity, and the exchange of information. It governs the way we interpret the world, process experiences, and communicate with other people. Your natal Mercury describes your natural mental style, the way your brain tends to operate by default throughout life. It reflects how you think, how you speak, how you learn, and how you make decisions on an instinctive level. But progressed Mercury shows how that mental style gradually evolves as you grow older and move through different phases of life. While your natal Mercury remains the foundation, progressed Mercury reveals the changing ways your perspective, communication style, and thought patterns develop over time. For example, someone born with Mercury in a fiery and impulsive sign may gradually become more cautious, patient, and reflective later in life through progression. Someone who once struggled to express emotions may eventually become more emotionally open and articulate. Another person may suddenly develop strong interests in spirituality, psychology, business, travel, creativity, or deeper self-understanding depending on where progressed Mercury moves in the chart. These changes do not erase your natal Mercury placement. Your natal chart always remains your core blueprint. Instead, progressed Mercury adds another layer that reflects your current mental growth and developmental stage. You can think of natal Mercury as your original mental wiring, while progressed Mercury represents the way your mind matures, adapts, and evolves throughout your life journey. One reason progressed Mercury can be difficult to notice is because these changes usually happen internally first. Unlike major life events that arrive suddenly and dramatically, Mercury progressions tend to operate quietly beneath the surface through shifts in thinking, perception, communication, and mental focus. You may not wake up one morning feeling completely different. Instead, the changes unfold gradually over time. You may slowly notice new interests developing, different priorities emerging, or changes in the way you communicate and process information. Some people become more curious and intellectually active during certain phases, while others become more introspective and reflective. You may also notice new ways of analyzing situations, greater confidence in speaking up, or changes in how you prefer to learn and absorb information. Sometimes the people around you notice these mental shifts before you do. For example, someone progressing from Mercury in Aries into Mercury in Taurus may gradually become calmer, slower, and more deliberate in communication after years of impulsive thinking. Someone progressing from Mercury in Capricorn into Mercury in Aquarius may begin opening their mind to more unconventional ideas after spending much of their life thinking in structured or rigid ways. Progressed Mercury often reflects mental readiness more than obvious external action. These progressions describe periods when your mind becomes prepared for certain experiences, perspectives, conversations, or life decisions. In many cases, the inner shift happens long before the outer circumstances fully change. Because Mercury also rules communication and information exchange, these progressions can strongly influence many different areas of life. They may affect your social interactions, writing style, public speaking ability, online presence, education, networking habits, media consumption, and overall intellectual confidence. Even subtle Mercury changes can slowly reshape the way you interact with the world and the way the world responds to your voice and ideas. Now that we've explored what progressed Mercury represents and why these changes often feel so subtle, let's look at how progressed Mercury behaves in each zodiac sign. The sign of your progressed Mercury describes the style of thinking and communication you're developing during a particular phase of life. It shows how your perspective evolves, how your decision-making changes, and the kinds of mental qualities that become more dominant over time. As progressed Mercury moves from sign to sign throughout your life, it often reflects entirely new ways of processing information and understanding the world. A progressed Mercury in Aries brings faster thinking, greater decisiveness, and a more direct communication style. You may become more outspoken, independent, or mentally competitive during this phase. There's often less patience for overthinking and more desire to act on ideas immediately. This can be an excellent period for entrepreneurship, leadership, or speaking your mind more confidently. However, impulsive decisions and blunt communication can also become more common. A progressed Mercury in Taurus slows the mind down in a productive way. Thinking becomes more practical, stable, patient, and grounded. You may focus more on financial security, long-term planning, physical comfort, or tangible results. There's often a stronger desire to think carefully before speaking or making decisions. This period favors consistency, persistence, and building reliable mental foundations. A progressed Mercury in Gemini is one of Mercury's most mentally active placements. Curiosity increases dramatically. You may become more social, communicative, adaptable, or interested in learning many different subjects. This progression often increases networking, writing, studying, travel, media consumption, or online activity. The challenge can be mental overstimulation or difficulty focusing on one path for too long. A progressed Mercury in Cancer shifts thinking toward emotional processing and intuition. Decisions may become more feeling-based rather than purely logical. Memories, family matters, emotional security, and personal history often become more mentally important. Communication may soften during this period and intuition tends to strengthen. However, emotional thinking can sometimes cloud objectivity. A progressed Mercury in Leo encourages creative self-expression and confidence in communication. You may become more dramatic, charismatic, passionate, or expressive with your ideas. There's often a stronger need to be heard, recognized, or respected intellectually. Teaching, performing, storytelling, leadership, and creative communication flourish during this phase. A progressed Mercury in Virgo sharpens analytical thinking and attention to detail. Your mind may become more organized, practical, efficient, and improvement-oriented. Many people become more focused on health, routines, productivity, or technical skills during this period. While excellent for problem-solving, this placement can also increase perfectionism or over-analysis. A progressed Mercury in Libra emphasizes balance, diplomacy, relationships, and social awareness in communication. Thinking becomes more collaborative and considerate of other viewpoints. This period often increases interest in relationships, aesthetics, fairness, negotiation, or partnership dynamics. Decision-making may become slower because the mind weighs multiple sides carefully. A progressed Mercury in Scorpio deepens the mind considerably. Thinking becomes more intense, investigative, private, and psychologically focused. You may become drawn toward hidden truths, emotional depth, spirituality, psychology, healing, or transformation. Communication may become more selective and emotionally charged during this phase. A progressed Mercury in Sagittarius expands perspective and increases interest in meaning, philosophy, travel, spirituality, education, or larger life questions. Thinking becomes broader and more future-oriented. You may feel mentally restless or eager for freedom and exploration. The challenge can be overlooking details while focusing too heavily on the big picture. A progressed Mercury in Capricorn creates more disciplined, realistic, and strategic thinking. Mental focus often shifts toward long-term goals, career planning, responsibility, or practical achievement. Communication may become more serious and reserved. This period favors structure, professionalism, and careful planning. A progressed Mercury in Aquarius opens the mind to unconventional perspectives, innovation, independence, and future-oriented thinking. You may become more experimental intellectually or more interested in technology, social issues, astrology, alternative ideas, or collective movements. Communication often becomes more detached but highly original. A progressed Mercury in Pisces softens logical rigidity and increases imagination, intuition, spirituality, creativity, and emotional sensitivity. Thinking may become more symbolic, dreamy, artistic, or empathic. This can be a beautiful period for creativity and spiritual growth, though it may also create confusion, escapism, or difficulty staying mentally grounded. While the sign shows how your thinking style evolves, the progressed Mercury house shows where your mental focus and communication energy are being directed in life. House changes often coincide with shifts in priorities, interests, conversations, and intellectual development. For example, in the first house of identity, your mind becomes more self-focused and identity-oriented. You may speak more openly, become mentally independent, or redefine how you express yourself to the world. Whereas in the fifth house of creativity and self-expression, your communication may become more playful, artistic, romantic, or performance-oriented during this phase. And in the ninth house, your mind may seek expansion, meaning education, philosophy, travel, or spiritual growth. This often coincides with major perspective shifts. Progressed Mercury may not always create dramatic external events, but it can completely change the way you think, communicate, and understand your life over time. These progressions often describe invisible mental evolution happening beneath the surface long before outer circumstances catch up. When progressed Mercury changes signs or houses, your perspective shifts. Your priorities shift. The kinds of conversations you have shift. Even the way you process reality itself can slowly transform. And because Mercury governs learning and perception, these progressions often reflect periods where you're mentally preparing for the next stage of growth in your life. In the next video, we'll continue exploring progressions by looking at progressed Venus and how relationships, values, and desires develop over time. Thank you for watching Celestial Zodiac. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss the next part of this series.